think it's EV News Roundup time. You'll have to bear with me a bit. I seem to be losing my voice. Picked up some sort of cold flu thing from Jasper over the weekend. Great. That's the real advantage of small children. They're like sort of bodybuilding, but for immune systems. Okay, so what are the big stories from the last 10 days? Well, one of the things that stood out for me is there are quite a few articles about fuel cell proponents sort of changing their tune, shall we say, when it comes to plug-ins. And I think what's really driving this is the fact that plug-ins are actually starting to sell in noticeable numbers, whereas fuel cells, well, they're really not. It was the president and CEO of Honda that said it best when asked a question along the lines of what will it take for fuel cell vehicles to go mainstream. His response was, well, we need to work on how power is used in a vehicle, and we also need to work on the hydrogen production side of things. So, to my mind, that's pretty much the whole thing, isn't it? You know, how you generate the energy and also how you use it. But I did also get some inkling of understanding as to why these automotive CEOs, like the boss of Toyota and Honda, actually quite like fuel cells as a concept. And basically, I think the fundamental reason, above and beyond everything else, is if you build a bigger vehicle, you only really have to put a bigger tank in, unless it's a lot bigger. And that is, I can see that as an advantage. You know, with a battery electric vehicle, the cost will scale completely in line with the size of the energy storage in that vehicle. And BMW's head of fuel cell development has also said that fuel cells and battery electric vehicles will coexist in the future. And sticking briefly with BMW for a minute, there's a hilarious YouTube video, which I will link to in the description, where a car thief steals a BMW i3 in London and is recorded by the dash cam sort of ringing his fence and saying, "This car is amazing, I've never driven anything like it." Brilliant. So even car thieves get EV grins. A couple of autonomous bolts have been spotted in San Francisco, which is interesting because the GM Bolt is not rumoured to have any real autonomous features on it at all, unlike the Model 3, which is a direct competitor. I have to say, I think any car manufacturer that isn't seriously looking at how they can introduce proper autonomy to their vehicles is running a massive risk with Tesla out there, because the great thing about autonomous driving is, especially the model that Tesla uses, the sensors are actually relatively inexpensive. It's the software development that costs a lot of money, but once it's developed, you can just put it in every car at every price point, and it will give you a massive competitive advantage over everyone else, which I strongly suspect is part of the strategy that Tesla are planning on employing in the future. Let's have a look at a bit more Tesla news for a minute. Tesla has recently announced a $2 billion stock sale, which seems sensible, given that they're probably going to have some fairly large bills for tooling and outfitting a factory for up to 500,000 cars. Luckily, they already have the factory, they just don't have the tooling. That's what the stock sale's for. And Elon Musk has rather cleverly managed to sell some shares as part of that, and used the money to pay the tax due on exercising his stock options, the end result of which is he actually owns a larger proportion of Tesla than he did before. So that was a smooth move, Elon. also, Tesla confirmed that there are 373,000 Model 3 reservations. They brought the number down a little bit by removing what they suspected were speculative orders. People just ordering cars because they were then going to flip them for a profit, in theory. So, still, 373,000 is a very big number. So, hence the reason why Tesla need to get a move on with production. After all, the deposits are refundable. And Tesla have been shopping around for potential other battery suppliers, which I'm not really sure they're actually serious about using. I mean, you come across a story about Tesla shopping around for a new battery supplier every now and again, and I think it's more just a case of them trying to make sure that they don't have all their eggs in the Panasonic basket. At the same time, Panasonic has, probably in response to that, turned around and said that they are ready to move their investment in the Gigafactory up in order to support future production targets that Tesla has announced. Increased production targets, I might say. I think it's something like 100,000 Model 3s in 2017, which sounds very unlikely, and then 500,000 cars in 2018, and that sounds very unlikely too. Now, I'm not saying they can't do it, but you know, you might almost say they need a couple of billion to invest. Maybe they do know what they're doing. And what other wonderful news have we got on the Tesla front? Or is that about it? That's probably about it, to be honest. This is a slightly more light-hearted news story. I wouldn't exactly call it international news, but Steve Marsh, the Nissan Leaf owner with the largest number of miles on his car, has just passed 150,000 miles. It sounds like the last 50,000 miles were pretty much a sort of labour of love. By the time he'd done that distance, he only had 52% of his remaining capacity. In a Nissan Leaf, that meant that he basically had about 35 miles of range when it was warm. So yeah, he's upgraded to a newer Leaf, which I'm sure will make his life much easier. At the same time, though, it is interesting to note that he actually managed to get 150,000 miles out of it, you know, and it would still be a perfectly good car for somebody who just wants to do sort of, you know, 20, 25 miles around town, bit of shopping and off home kind of thing. And just for people out there saying electric cars can't take being quick charged regularly and all the rest of it, I think he basically quick charged it every day. Be interesting to know what his capacity would have been if he'd been able to have a slightly gentler charging and usage pattern. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. If you have, remember to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe if you haven't already, so that you don't miss out on future episodes. And I'll see you tomorrow for the next installment of my daily vlog. Bye! One more piece of Tesla news just quickly. Apparently quite a few suppliers and analysts doubt that Tesla can meet its production targets. Now, whilst I share their doubts, when a supplier doubts you can meet your targets, that's dangerously close to being a self-fulfilling prophecy. And certainly that was what held back the Model S production ramp in the early days, was suppliers had been told by sort of industry insiders that Tesla were going to make maybe 3,000 cars in a year. So they tooled up and made, you know, 3,000 sets of door handles, and when month 2 rolled around and Tesla ordered another 3,000 door handles, they went, but you've already had it. Yeah, clever guys.